Everyone in the kingdom expected the Omega Maid to lose everything that night, but no one expected the Alpha King's forgotten wolf to awaken because of her. The grand halls of Silvermoon Palace shined beneath thousands of golden lights as nobles from every corner of the kingdom gathered for the most important ceremony of the year. It was a night meant to celebrate the strength of the Alpha King, Alexander Whitmore, the ruler whose name was known across every land. He was powerful, respected, and admired, but behind the crown was a man who carried a silence no one understood. For years, Alexander had waited for the bond that every alpha dreamed of, yet nothing had ever awakened the ancient connection within him. Many believed the legendary bond would never come. Among the countless servants preparing the ceremony was Amelia Carter, a young Omega Maid who had learned to stay invisible. With her fair skin, soft brown hair, and gentle blue eyes, Amelia had spent most of her life avoiding attention. She knew how the world viewed Omegas without noble families. She knew how quickly people judged someone who had no title, no influence, and no powerful name. But Amelia had something most people in the palace had forgotten how to carry. She had kindness. While nobles focused on appearances and status, Amelia noticed the small things others ignored. She helped older servants carry supplies, comforted nervous newcomers, and quietly repaired mistakes before anyone could notice. She never expected praise. She never wanted recognition. She simply believed everyone deserved care. That evening, Amelia carried a silver tray through the crowded ceremony hall, carefully moving between guests dressed in elegant royal clothing. She knew one mistake could change everything. The Alpha King's arrival had made the entire palace tense. Every servant had been warned to remain perfect. Every movement had to be careful, but fate had already written a different moment for her. As Amelia passed near Alexander, a sudden turn from the crowd caused her to lose balance for only a second. The tray shifted, and a small tear appeared on the fabric of the Alpha King's ceremonial shirt. The entire hall became silent. Conversation stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the young Omega Maid standing before the ruler of Silvermoon. Amelia froze. Her heart raced as she immediately lowered her head. "Your Majesty, I am truly sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." The nobles watched with curiosity. They expected anger. They expected the Omega Maid to be removed from the ceremony. They expected the mistake to prove that someone like her did not belong near the throne. But Alexander did not respond the way anyone predicted. The moment Amelia touched his shirt, something ancient inside him stirred. The wolf that had remained quiet for years suddenly awakened. Alexander looked at Amelia, not as a servant who had made a mistake, but as someone carrying a strange warmth he had never felt before. The feeling was impossible to explain. It was not because of her position. It was not because of her appearance. It was because of something deeper, something his instincts recognized before his mind could understand. Amelia slowly looked up, expecting disappointment. Instead, she saw something she had never expected from the most powerful man in the kingdom. Curiosity. Alexander studied her expression and noticed the truth in her eyes. She was not trying to gain favor. She was not pretending to be important. She was simply afraid that she had caused trouble for others. In that moment, the Alpha King realized the person standing before him was different from everyone around him. The ceremony continued, but nothing felt the same. The kingdom had witnessed a moment that would soon become a legend. The Omega Maid who believed she was invisible had awakened something inside the Alpha King that had been silent for years. And neither Amelia nor Alexander knew that this single accident would begin a journey that would change the future of Silvermoon forever. The morning after the ceremony, Silvermoon Palace felt different. The same marble halls stood beneath the morning light. The same royal banners moved gently with the breeze, and the same servants continued their daily duties. But something had changed. Everyone knew the name of Amelia Carter now. The Omega Maid who had once walked quietly through the palace had become the subject of endless conversations. Some spoke with curiosity. Some spoke with doubt. Some wondered how a simple accident could awaken something that had remained silent inside the Alpha King for years. Amelia wanted none of the attention. She returned to her duties as soon as the ceremony ended, hoping that if she worked hard enough, people would eventually forget what happened. She spent the morning in the palace healing room, organizing supplies and preparing remedies for the servants who needed help. It was the same work she had always done, the same quiet routine that made her feel useful. But even there, she noticed people looking at her differently. A young servant approached carefully while carrying a box of supplies. "Everyone is talking about you," the servant said softly. Amelia looked surprised. "About me?" The young servant nodded. "They say the Alpha King noticed you." Amelia lowered her eyes and gently arranged the herbs in front of her. "I only made a mistake during the ceremony. I do not think it means anything more." She truly believed those words. Amelia had spent her entire life learning not to expect too much. Hope could be dangerous when the world constantly reminded you of your place. Meanwhile, Alexander Whitmore stood inside the Royal Archive, searching through ancient records that had been untouched for decades. The Alpha King had faced countless challenges during his reign, but nothing had confused him more than the feeling that appeared when Amelia touched his ceremonial shirt. His wolf had awakened after years of silence, and Alexander needed to understand why. The archive was filled with ancient books, forgotten histories, and records of previous Alpha rulers. As he searched through the old writings, he discovered something unusual. There were stories of rare moments when the royal bond appeared unexpectedly, not through wealth, family connections, or political alliances, but through a person's true nature. Alexander carefully read the words written by past Alpha Kings. The bond was never meant to choose the most powerful person. It was meant to recognize the person who brought balance to the Alpha's heart. For the first time in years, Alexander wondered if everything he had been taught was incomplete. Later that afternoon, he found Amelia in the palace garden. She was carefully caring for a group of flowers near the old stone pathway. She looked peaceful, unaware that the King Alpha himself was watching her. "You always help things grow," Alexander said. Amelia turned in surprise. "Your Majesty, I was only taking care of the garden flowers." Alexander looked at the flowers and then back at her. "That is what I mean." Amelia did not understand. She had never considered her actions important. To her, helping others was simply natural. "Why are you not afraid of me?" Alexander asked. The question surprised her. Amelia looked at him quietly before answering. "I respect you because you are the king, but I believe everyone deserves kindness, no matter who they are." Those simple words stayed with him. Most people approached Alexander because of his crown. They carefully chose their words because of his power. Amelia spoke to him with sincerity. She saw the person behind the title. For the first time in a long time, Alexander felt understood. But while the Alpha King began searching for answers, others inside Silvermoon Palace started searching for reasons to separate them. The nobles who valued tradition could not accept that an Omega Maid had awakened the bond of their ruler. And as whispers spread through the kingdom, Amelia and Alexander moved closer to discovering a truth that had been hidden for generations. The days after the unexpected moment in the palace garden brought a quiet change to Silvermoon Palace. Amelia Carter continued her work as an Omega Maid, but she could feel that everything around her had shifted. The servants who once passed by without noticing her now greeted her with curiosity. The nobles who once ignored her now watched carefully, trying to understand why the Alpha King seemed interested in someone they believed should remain unseen. Amelia did not know how to handle the attention. She had never dreamed of standing near the center of royal conversations. Her entire life had been built around helping others quietly, not being noticed by the most powerful people in the kingdom. Yet every time she tried to return to her ordinary routine, fate seemed determined to remind her that her life was no longer ordinary. Alexander Whitmore continued searching the royal archives, hoping to understand the strange connection he felt toward Amelia. The ancient records contained stories of Alpha Kings who searched their entire lives for their destined bond. But none of those stories explained why his wolf had awakened after years of silence because of a young Omega Maid with no noble title. As he studied the forgotten pages, Alexander discovered references to an ancient group known as the Moonkeepers. They were not warriors or rulers. They were healers, protectors, and people who carried wisdom passed down through generations. The records described them as individuals who could bring peace to those around them. Alexander remembered Amelia's actions. He remembered how she apologized before worrying about herself. He remembered how she treated every servant with respect. Slowly, he began to understand that what drew him to her was not an accident. It was something deeper. Meanwhile, Amelia found herself facing a challenge she never expected. Some servants started treating her differently, but not everyone showed kindness. A few believed she had somehow gained influence she did not deserve. They whispered that an Omega Maid could never truly belong beside the Alpha King. Amelia heard those words, but she tried not to let them change her. She returned to the healing room every morning and continued helping anyone who needed her. One afternoon, Alexander visited the infirmary and saw Amelia caring for an elderly servant. She spoke gently, listened patiently, and offered comfort without expecting anything in return. The Alpha King stood quietly for a moment, realizing that Amelia was the same person whether someone powerful was watching or not. When the servant left, Alexander approached her. "You never seem to change your kindness depending on who is standing in front of you," he said. Amelia looked surprised. "Why would I?" she asked. "Everyone deserves respect." Alexander smiled slightly. It was a simple answer, but it carried a meaning he had spent years searching for. "Most people treat others differently when they know their position," he said. "You do not." Amelia looked down. "I do not think I am doing anything special." "That is exactly what makes it special," Alexander replied. Their conversation was interrupted when a royal messenger arrived with an urgent request from the council. The nobles wanted answers about Amelia's connection to the ancient bond. They questioned whether an Omega without a powerful family name could truly stand beside the Alpha King. Amelia felt the old fear return, the fear of not belonging, the fear that no matter how hard she tried, people would only see what she lacked. But Alexander looked at her with calm confidence. "Do not let others decide your worth before they know your heart," he told her. Those words stayed with Amelia as she prepared to face the royal council. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps she had spent too many years believing she was smaller than she truly was. And while the kingdom prepared for a decision that could change its future, the hidden truth about Amelia's past slowly moved closer to being revealed. The Grand Council chamber of Silvermoon Palace had never felt so quiet. The moment Amelia Carter stepped inside, she felt the weight of hundreds of years of tradition surrounding her. The towering stone walls, ancient royal symbols, and rows of noble families reminded her that she was standing in a place where decisions about the kingdom had been made for generations. Yet this time, the decision was about her. The Omega Maid who had always believed she belonged in the background was now standing before the most powerful people in Silvermoon. Amelia kept her hands calm and her expression steady, even though uncertainty filled her heart. She knew what many people saw when they looked at her. They saw an Omega without a noble title. They saw a servant who had accidentally stepped too close to the throne. But Amelia also remembered what Alexander told her. Her worth was not something others could decide. Across the chamber, Alexander Whitmore stood beside the royal council. The Alpha King carried the same authority that had guided him through years of leadership, but today his presence felt different. He was not standing there as a ruler protecting tradition. He was standing there as someone who believed in the person beside him. The council members began discussing the ancient bond and the mystery surrounding Amelia. One elder noble spoke carefully. "The kingdom has always followed certain traditions. The partner of an Alpha King has always been connected to powerful families and respected bloodlines." Amelia listened quietly. She understood why they questioned her. She had grown up knowing that the world often judged people by what they had instead of who they were. But before she could lower her eyes, Alexander spoke. Perhaps the kingdom followed traditions without remembering their purpose. The chamber became silent. The Alpha King looked toward the ancient records placed on the council table. The bond was never created to reward status. It was created to recognize balance, trust, and the qualities that strengthen a kingdom. The nobles exchanged uncertain looks. They had expected Alexander to defend the old ways. They had not expected him to challenge them. Amelia looked at him in surprise. She knew the Alpha King had power, but in that moment she saw something else. She saw someone willing to stand beside what he believed was right. The council continued questioning Amelia's background. They asked about her family, her past, and why the ancient bond had awakened through her. Amelia felt the familiar feeling of being judged return. For a moment, she wanted to disappear like she had always done before. But then she remembered the people she had helped. She remembered every small act of kindness she had given without expecting anything back. Slowly, she lifted her head. "I do not know why this happened," Amelia said honestly. "I do not know why destiny chose me. But I know that every person in this kingdom deserves respect, whether they have a title or not." Her voice was gentle, but her words carried across the chamber. The room remained silent after she finished. For the first time, many of the nobles did not see Amelia as a maid. They saw someone with the courage to speak from the heart. Later that evening, Alexander found Amelia standing near the palace gardens, looking at the moonlight reflecting over the flowers. "You surprised everyone today," he said. Amelia smiled softly. "I was still afraid." Alexander looked at her thoughtfully. "Fear does not mean you are weak." Amelia looked toward him. "Then what does it mean?" "It means you cared enough for something to matter." Those words stayed with her. Meanwhile, hidden among the ancient records of Silvermoon Palace, a forgotten truth was beginning to emerge. Amelia's family was connected to the Moonkeepers, an ancient lineage believed to have protected the balance between Omegas and Alphas for generations. The council had questioned whether she belonged beside the Alpha King. But soon, the kingdom would discover that Amelia had never been ordinary. She had simply been waiting for the right moment to be seen. The discovery hidden within the ancient records of Silvermoon Palace changed everything Amelia Carter thought she knew about herself. For years, she had believed she was simply an Omega made with an ordinary life, someone who could help others but would never be remembered. Yet the forgotten pages inside the royal archives told a different story. The Moonkeepers were not just a name from old legends. They were a lineage of healers and guardians who had once helped maintain harmony between Alphas and Omegas throughout the kingdom. Their strength was never measured by power or position. It came from wisdom, compassion, and the ability to bring peace when others only saw differences. Alexander Whitmore stood beside Amelia inside the ancient archive chamber as the royal scholars carefully revealed the history that had been hidden for generations. The old manuscripts described a rare connection between an Alpha King and a Moonkeeper descendant, a bond that appeared only when the kingdom needed balance. Alexander read the words slowly, realizing why his wolf had awakened after so many silent years. It was not because Amelia had a special title. It was because she carried the same qualities the ancient Alpha Kings had searched for. Amelia looked at the records with disbelief. "My family was connected to the royal history," she asked softly. The scholar nodded. "Your ancestors served the kingdom in ways that were forgotten over time. They never sought recognition. They believed kindness was its own reward." Amelia looked down at her hands, remembering all the moments when she wondered if her efforts mattered. She had spent years feeling invisible, but now she discovered that the very qualities people ignored were the reasons her ancestors were remembered. Alexander noticed the emotion in her eyes. He understood that this revelation was not about giving Amelia a higher place in the kingdom. It was about helping her finally see the value she had always carried. "You never needed a legend to prove your worth," Alexander told her. "The kingdom simply needed time to recognize what was already there." Amelia looked at him quietly. Coming from anyone else, the words might have felt like a compliment. But from Alexander, they felt different. He was not speaking as a king making a royal announcement. He was speaking as someone who truly saw her. However, not everyone in Silvermoon welcomed the discovery. Some nobles worried that the ancient records would change the traditions they had protected for centuries. They believed the kingdom was safer when everything remained the same. Amelia heard their concerns, and once again, she wondered if she had created more trouble than she had solved. Alexander noticed her hesitation as they walked through the palace garden that evening. "You are thinking about leaving," he said gently. Amelia looked surprised. "How did you know?" "Because you always think about protecting others before yourself." She was quiet for a moment. "I do not want the kingdom to suffer because of me." Alexander looked toward the palace lights shining across the garden. "Amelia, a person who brings peace is not a burden." Those words touched something inside her. For the first time, Amelia began to understand that accepting her place did not mean becoming arrogant. It meant allowing herself to believe that she mattered. As days passed, the kingdom slowly learned more about the forgotten Moonkeeper legacy. The same people who once overlooked Amelia began to question everything they thought they knew about strength and status. Meanwhile, Alexander continued discovering that the connection between them was changing him as well. The Alpha King who once carried every responsibility alone was learning that trust did not make him weaker. It made him complete. But as the truth about Amelia's heritage spread through Silvermoon, another challenge waited ahead. The kingdom would soon have to decide whether it was ready to accept a future built not on old traditions, but on understanding and compassion. The days following the discovery of Amelia Carter's hidden heritage brought a new feeling throughout Silvermoon Palace. The whispers that once followed her were changing. Some people still struggled to accept that an Omega Maid could be connected to an ancient lineage, but others began to see what Alexander Whitmore had already understood. Amelia was never valuable because of her family history. She was valuable because of the person she had always been. Inside the palace halls, Amelia continued helping others the same way she always had. She carried supplies for the healing rooms, listened to servants who needed comfort, and offered kindness without expecting anything in return. The difference was that now people noticed. For the first time in her life, Amelia was not invisible. But being seen came with its own challenges. The royal council requested that Amelia appear before the kingdom once again, this time not as a servant who had made a mistake, but as someone whose existence could change the future of Silvermoon. Standing before the gathered nobles, Amelia felt the same nervousness she had felt before. The difference was that this time, she did not feel alone. Alexander stood beside her, not above her, not in front of her, beside her. The Alpha King looked across the chamber with calm confidence. A kingdom is not strengthened by ignoring those who have been forgotten, he said. It becomes stronger when it recognizes the value that was always there. The nobles listened carefully. Some remained uncertain, but others began to understand that the future of Silvermoon could not be protected by holding onto old beliefs forever. Amelia looked around the chamber and remembered the girl she had been before this journey began. A girl who apologized for taking up space. A girl who believed her dreams were too small because of her position. But now she stood in the center of the kingdom, not because she demanded attention, but because her actions had spoken for her. When it was her turn to speak, Amelia took a quiet breath. I never wanted power, she said. I never wanted a place above anyone else. I only wanted to help the people around me. If my presence can bring understanding between others, then I will accept this responsibility. Her words carried a sincerity that no title could create. Alexander watched her with quiet admiration. He had ruled Silvermoon for years, but Amelia reminded him of something he had forgotten. A true leader did not simply command others. A true leader listened. Later that evening, Alexander and Amelia walked through the palace gardens beneath the stars. The same place where they had first spoken honestly with each other now felt different. You have changed since the first day we met, Alexander said. Amelia smiled softly. I think I am only beginning to understand who I was all along. Alexander looked toward the peaceful kingdom beyond the palace walls. That may be the greatest change of all. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King no longer felt like he carried the future alone. And for the first time in her life, Amelia no longer saw herself as someone who needed permission to belong. Yet beyond the palace, the ancient records continued to reveal more secrets about the Moonkeeper legacy. The bond between the Omega Maid and the Alpha King was not only about destiny. It was connected to the future of an entire kingdom. And soon, Amelia and Alexander would face the greatest test of whether Silvermoon was truly ready for a new era. The days ahead brought a quiet transformation to Silvermoon Kingdom. The palace that once felt like a place where Amelia Carter had to hide herself slowly became a place where her presence was welcomed. Yet Amelia knew that acceptance was not created by a single moment. It was built through trust, understanding, and the choices people made every day. She continued her work in the healing rooms, helping servants and villagers who came seeking care. The difference was that now people listened when she spoke. They saw the patience behind her actions and the compassion she had carried long before anyone knew her name. Alexander Whitmore noticed this change more than anyone. The Alpha King had spent years believing that responsibility meant carrying every burden alone. He had protected the kingdom through difficult decisions, always placing duty before himself. But Amelia showed him another kind of strength. She showed him that a leader could be powerful while still being gentle. One afternoon, Alexander invited Amelia to walk through the ancient gardens beyond the palace walls. The gardens had belonged to the Moonkeepers centuries earlier, and many believed the flowers there carried the memory of those who had protected Silvermoon. As they walked along the stone paths, Amelia looked around with wonder. I never imagined I would see a place like this, she said quietly. Alexander looked at her with curiosity. Why not? Amelia smiled softly. Because people like me usually do not enter places meant for kings and legends. Alexander stopped walking for a moment. Amelia, You keep speaking as if you are separate from this kingdom, but you have always been part of it." His words made her pause. For so long, she had accepted the idea that her position determined her value. Now she was beginning to understand that her actions had always mattered, even when no one noticed them. Meanwhile, the Royal Council continued studying the ancient Moonkeeper records. They discovered more details about the bond between the Alpha King and the Omega lineage. The old writings explained that the strongest kingdoms were not built by power alone. They survived because different strengths came together. The Alpha brought leadership. The Omega brought balance and wisdom. Together, they created harmony. When the council shared this discovery, many nobles began to reconsider their beliefs. They realized that tradition had been preserved for generations, but sometimes people forgot the meaning behind those traditions. Amelia was not changing Silvermoon because she wanted a higher position. She was changing it because she reminded everyone of something they had forgotten. That evening, Alexander stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom. The lights of villages across the land reflected beneath the night sky. Amelia joined him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "When I first became king, I thought strength meant never needing anyone," Alexander said. Amelia looked at him gently. "And what do you think now?" He smiled. "I think strength also means knowing who can stand beside you." Amelia felt warmth in those words. She had spent years believing she needed to prove she deserved kindness. Now she understood that she had always deserved it. But as the kingdom slowly embraced this new future, a final question remained. The bond between the Omega Maid and the Alpha King had awakened ancient hope, but would the entire kingdom truly accept a future beyond old expectations? The answer would soon reveal whether Silvermoon was ready to change forever. The morning sun rose over Silvermoon Kingdom, shining across the palace towers that had witnessed generations of history. For the first time in many years, the kingdom prepared for a celebration that was not about victory, wealth, or power. It was a celebration of understanding. The ancient bond between the Omega Maid and the Alpha King had become a symbol of a new beginning, but Amelia Carter still found it difficult to believe how much her life had changed. Not long ago, she had walked through these same halls believing she was someone the world would never notice. Now, people greeted her with respect, not because of a title, but because they had seen the kindness she carried every day. The royal ceremony of recognition was held in the heart of the palace gardens, where the Moonkeepers had once gathered centuries before. The ancient trees surrounded the area, their branches moving gently in the morning breeze. Servants, nobles, and citizens from across Silvermoon came together to witness a moment that would become part of the kingdom's history. Amelia stood beneath the golden sunlight, wearing an elegant gown inspired by the traditions of the Moonkeepers. She felt nervous, but she no longer felt small. She remembered the girl she had been before everything changed, the girl who believed she had to stay unnoticed to be accepted. That girl was still part of her, but now she understood something important. Being gentle did not mean being weak. Alexander Whitmore stood beside her, wearing the royal attire of the Alpha King. Yet the people no longer saw only the ruler who carried the crown. They saw a man who had learned from the Omega, who changed his heart. The ceremony began with the reading of the ancient Moonkeeper records. The words spoke of balance, trust, and the connection between different strengths working together. They reminded everyone that destiny was not created by status or power. It was created by the choices people made and the kindness they showed to others. Amelia listened carefully, feeling the weight of the moment. She had never wanted to change the kingdom. She had only wanted to help the people around her. But sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could create the greatest changes. After the ceremony, Alexander and Amelia walked through the palace garden together. The same path where they once had a simple conversation now felt like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. "Do you ever miss the quiet days before all of this?" Alexander asked. Amelia smiled. "Sometimes, but I think I was quiet because I was afraid people would not accept who I truly was." Alexander looked at her with understanding. "And now?" Amelia looked toward the kingdom beyond the garden. "Now I know that being yourself is not something to hide." Those words stayed with Alexander. He realized that Amelia had given him something no advisor or royal teacher had ever been able to give him. She had shown him that a kingdom was not protected only by strength. It was protected by compassion, trust, and the people who believed in one another. As the evening arrived, the lights of Silver Moon illuminated the palace, and the kingdom celebrated a future built on acceptance. But deep within the ancient archives, one final message from the Moonkeepers was discovered. It spoke of a time when an Alpha King and an Omega with a gentle heart would bring a new era to the land. Alexander and Amelia had found each other by chance, but their journey had only revealed what had always been true. Destiny did not choose those who appeared perfect. Destiny chose those who could bring out the best in each other. The final days of the year brought a peaceful warmth to Silver Moon Kingdom, a feeling that many people believed had been impossible only a short time before. The palace halls that once carried whispers of doubt were now filled with laughter, conversation, and a new sense of unity. Amelia Carter often walked through those same halls and remembered the young Omega, Maid, who once tried to become invisible. She remembered the fear of making mistakes, the feeling that she did not belong, and the belief that her dreams were too small for a world ruled by powerful families. Now, she understood that her journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about discovering the value that had always existed within her. Alexander Whitmore stood beside her as the kingdom entered a new era. The Alpha King, who once believed he had to carry every responsibility alone, had learned that true leadership came from connection. He had not lost his strength by opening his heart. Instead, he had discovered a deeper kind of strength, one built on trust and compassion. Together, Alexander and Amelia visited villages throughout Silver Moon, listening to citizens and learning about their hopes for the future. Amelia continued helping others with the same gentle spirit she had shown from the beginning. She never asked to be admired. She never searched for attention. Her kindness remained simple and honest, and that was exactly why people respected her. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains surrounding the kingdom, Alexander and Amelia returned to the ancient Moonkeeper Garden. The flowers that had witnessed the beginning of their journey now bloomed beneath the evening sky. "Do you remember the first time we stood here?" Alexander asked. Amelia smiled. "I remember thinking my entire life was about to change." Alexander looked at her warmly. "It did." Amelia looked across the garden and watched the palace lights shining in the distance. "I thought destiny was something that happened to people chosen by fate. But now I think destiny is also about the choices we make every day." Alexander nodded. He knew she was right. The bond between them had started with a surprising moment, but it had grown because of patience, respect, and understanding. Their connection was not important because of tradition or legend. It was important because they had chosen to see each other as they truly were. Years later, the story of the Omega Maid and the Alpha King would be remembered throughout Silver Moon. Children would hear about the ruler who learned that kindness was a form of strength and the young woman who proved that a humble heart could change an entire kingdom. The people would remember that Amelia was never defined by the position she held. She was remembered for the lives she touched and the hope she brought to those who felt forgotten. And Alexander was remembered not only as a powerful king, but as a leader who understood that the greatest kingdoms were built through compassion. Their story became a reminder for every generation that destiny does not choose people because they appear perfect. It chooses people who can inspire each other to become better. In a world filled with expectations, Amelia and Alexander showed Silver Moon a timeless truth. A gentle heart can hold incredible strength, and love built on understanding can transform everything it touches. If this story of courage, destiny, and kindness touched your heart, remember to subscribe, like, share this journey with others, and leave a comment about the moment that inspired you the most.